Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to your 145 session. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Quinn from the University of Nebraska to discuss one PreStage to rule them all. Quinn, welcome. Let's give a warm welcome to Quinn.
Thank you. Good afternoon. They saved the best for right after lunch when everybody's a little bit sleepy, so I'm here to energize you, hopefully. Today, I'm going to present on one PreStage to rule them all, secure macOS deployment with Power Automate. My name is Quinn Hariff. I am from the University of Nebraska, and there I work on the platform security team as an endpoint security engineer. I've worked in IT for around 10 years, all at the University of Nebraska in various positions, but I've been managing Apple devices for about 7 of those years. My main enjoyment in that role is to just kind of simplify complex processes. So, and I've presented on those before. I did a JNUC in 2020 when we were all online about an app that I built called Exhibit for Apple TV. And then I've done some more recent Mac admins presentations, one in 2023 for macOS security compliance, and then recently in July, I presented this presentation. So if you were there, this is going to look familiar. If you weren't, welcome, and I'm excited to share. So a little bit about the University of Nebraska ITS organization. So we are a centralized unit under the Office of the President, which means we support the entirety of the University of Nebraska system. That includes like 3 main campuses, UNK in Kearney, UNL in Lincoln, and UNO in Omaha. We also have satellite areas in our research and extension centers, and within all of that, we have about 42 unique support teams that cover support for the entirety of the state of Nebraska. So that is quite a lot of hands in the fire and a lot of coals in the fire, cooks in the kitchen. But we work with all of those individuals, all of those support teams to make sure that they're able to support not only their macOS devices, but their Windows, Linux, et cetera. So my team in platform security is responsible for our endpoint infrastructure along with our Jamf Pro environment. We manage the baseline of our environment. So when we're deploying devices, we have a standard that we want everybody to follow. Along with that, we also kind of control the security-related functions, the patching, the OS updates, all of that good stuff, and incident response as well. So our kind of goal with our enterprise endpoint management model here is to enable our support staff to perform those actions that they need to support their users. So we handle kind of the infrastructure needs and the core portions of our Jamf environment, and they handle a lot of the software deployment, the endpoint deployment, but we do the baseline there too. So in that, we also introduced a lot of procedures and training so that everybody is on the same page on how we're deploying devices in our organization. The NU Apple environment specifically, around 5,300 macOS devices, 450 tvOS, a little over 3,000 iOS and iPadOS. We've got some sprawl from our 10-plus-year-old Jamf Pro environment. We have 81 Jamf Pro sites. We're trying to narrow that. That's due to various access control needs and just kind of historically different areas of support that needed different sites. Within that, we also have 164 PreStage enrollments. Not all of those are used to their full potential. For a long time, people would just make them as they needed them for different deployment types. And then across all that, we have 280 Jamf Pro administrators. So not all of those users are top-level Jamf administrators. They have site-based access that they're using to do specific functions within their areas of support. So our Apple environment gets a little silly sometimes. We have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, as I said. We have varying amounts of Apple expertise in our organization. Some folks rarely require any assistance with their deployments. Others, they deploy one Mac a year, and every time they have to go back and do it again, it's confusing to have to go and assign to a PreStage, assign to an Apple School Manager site, all of that. So we want to streamline that process and make it easier for everybody, while also providing the complexity or the options for complexity for some of our power users. At some point, most of those 42 support units have to deploy at least one Mac to a user or support at least one macOS user. So our Apple School environment, Apple School Manager environment, we actually deploy, or we actually assign everything to like a standard general bucket in ASM, and then that funnels into a standard Jamf site that if folks need to vary to other places, they historically could go in and assign their devices. That was part of their workflow. Historically, we've just used this function as a catch-all, so things that weren't getting assigned by technicians, we could at least get some management on and some baseline security on. But with all of those folks with access to device assignment in Apple School Manager, we've had folks come in and change something up on us, and suddenly all of our devices are funneling into a specific support area that we didn't intend. So we really want to streamline that process too. So some of the challenges we face in our environment with such a diverse number of needs and areas of support is just having so many different configurations, all kind of moving towards the same objective with different ways to get there. We've supported technicians with different needs and deployment processes, which is really complex when you're trying to untangle PreStage enrollments and policies and configuration profiles. But that's kind of the nature of higher ed. A lot of folks that I talk to that are in higher ed always have kind of sprawling and weird configurations that are built over long needs for IT in their organization, and IT just didn't like pop up one day. It was slowly built up over time. So our Jamf environment kind of models that a little bit. But our team is responsible, our security team is responsible for maintaining that baseline, and we need an efficient way to accomplish that. We also want to do some standardized naming of the devices. So we require devices to follow a naming standard, along with a security risk level to gain access to specific resources on our network. So we want to streamline that process and reduce manual intervention within that. So some of our objectives of this process and what I'll be showing you today is a workflow that we're using with Power Automate to kind of accomplish a single PreStage, so we can take advantage of things like zero-touch deployments and bring on some of those vendor-supported tools like Jamf Setup Manager, and also just really add some automation to the mix without increasing a security risk in that space. So like, we don't want to be injecting, or we don't want to place credentials into script parameters. That's an insecure way of tackling automations, but we still want to take advantage of some of the cool things you can do with that space. So some of the tools we're using for this workflow, we're a Jamf Pro school. We have been for quite a while now. Out of just pure coincidence, we're also a Microsoft school. And so we have access to Power Automate. So that's what I've used to build out this process. And then a tool I really like to use is Jamf Setup Manager. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like a little bit too. One thing to note here is if you use any other tools, if you have other like iPaaS or integration platform as a service type tools, you can use those in place of Power Automate. You can take this same logic and apply it there as well. So for Jamf Setup Manager, there's a quick QR code. It is hosted on the Jamf GitHub site. And it's just a really neat tool that gives you some flexibility in the setup process. We're actually using it to display over the Setup Assistant window. And that really works well in our process currently. So definitely check that tool out if you haven't already. I'm not going to dive into too many of the technical aspects of this tool specifically, but there's lots of resources online for you to take advantage of. So what does this setup workflow look like? Traditionally, we've had something that looks more like this, where we're getting devices from our Apple authorized reseller. They're coming into our Apple School Manager environment automatically. Our workstation support teams are assigning those devices to their buckets in Apple School Manager, their areas of support, and then they're also assigning to a particular PreStage based off of the type of configuration that they want to deploy to that device, whether it's like a lab machine or a single user device, or maybe there's some other like student-based configuration that they want to deploy out. And then they're also, we have a lot of folks doing kind of the white glove approach when it comes to setting up their devices. It's quite a bad habit to kick and try and get zero touch deployed. So we want to find ways to kind of accomplish that and allow that zero touch model to come into play. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to allow that zero touch model and automate those steps in between, while also allowing our workstation support folks to actually interject in the process where they need to streamline their process as well. Maybe they're wanting to do a kind of a single touch white glove approach with somebody who's not as tech savvy. I think that's fine. Some users need that. So we want to provide that opportunity as well. So here's what that workflow looks like visually. You're in Setup Assistant. You've started stepping through your Setup Assistant screens and enrolling the device. After enrollment, Jamf Setup Manager kicks off. It's a PreStage package with a configuration file. It kicks off and starts running some of the items that you've selected in your configuration. This is kind of a chunk of what that configuration looks like. It's just a plist file. We kick off specifically the set computer name policy. So right there, we have a policy with a trigger, set computer name, and that's actually kicking off a script that allows us to go through our naming standard and step down and select a specific department. So in this case, we're doing information technology services. We're adding security services for the department. And then once we've selected the next item, it sets the name. So this is actually pulling from a JSON configuration that we've built and maintain that ties our prefix list of a couple hundred departments to a specific site, so where they should land. So there's actually some loading of that live data in here, and then once it breaks it down and comes into the Swift dialog box displayed, we actually get to find out what the site is that will be displayed or launched into. So from this point, we're also setting risk classification. A quick look at what that looks like. Simple drop-down box as well. And we're going to set medium risk on this device. And then from there, it moves on and does the rest of its workflow. We get to deploy the rest of our baseline, and then Jamf Setup Manager goes away, and we get our typical create a computer account screen. It's wonderful and smooth. I don't know if folks are using Jamf Setup Manager, how much longer we actually have access to that sort of feature and launching over the Setup Assistant screen, but if that didn't work, we could certainly take it and place it over like the login window, and that would work as well. There are some different options for that, but if this is a feature you're using or a feature you want to use, file feedback with Apple, of course, that launching things over Setup Assistant is a cool feature, and we want to keep that. And we encrypt the device and continue on. So from there, I'll dive into what's going on behind the scenes. So we see that's what the user sees, or that's what the technician sees, but what is happening behind the scenes. So with our API workflow, we want to make sure that we're not using Jamf API credentials on the device, right? We want to make sure only the endpoint can initiate its own changes. And for that, we're going to use Power Automate as the intermediary, and then use the trust that is anchored in MDM to actually facilitate the communication of a key that can be used to request specific actions through Power Automate. The goal here is that only that device can modify information about itself and for a narrow amount of time. So here's our setup manager plist again. We kicked off that set computer name policy. And again, it looked like that. So from this point forward, when you hit OK, we're going to kick off the rest of our script, right? In that script, we're actually pulling the Jamf management ID, so the long string that's unique for every Jamf device. We're sending that down to the device through that Jamf setup manager plist file. We're also giving a unique URL for that Power Automate flow in that script. And that request to retrieve that token is sent to Power Automate. So the device initiates a call, an API call to Power Automate using our kind of unique URL for that particular flow. It says, this is my management ID, and then it just does a curl command, or runs a curl command to that API URL with an action init, and then the management ID of itself. So Power Automate is going to receive that request, and then it's going to generate a unique key and an expiration timestamp that it can deliver to both the Jamf extension attribute and initiate an MDM settings command that will send an MDM command down to the device and land a file on the device that we can use to compare in our script. So I'll show you what that Power Automate flow looks like. Here's kind of the beginning portion of that. When that HTTP request is received, we step through here. We have kind of two different values that we had, that action type and then the management ID, were the two fields in our JSON body that we sent from our script. We're then pulling from Jamf Pro some information about the computer. So we're actually running an API call to get, based off the management ID supplied, just the inventory record data that we want to use in this API workflow. And again, at this point, credentials are all staying, API credentials for Jamf Pro are all in our Power Automate flow. They're not leaving that kind of secure workflow. In that initiate command, first we're going to actually generate a random token. So this is just a variabilized string that we're running a kind of child flow that does some calculations to generate a string. And then we're also generating a timestamp here that we can then run an API call to deliver to the Jamf Pro API. So we're actually sending down to the device record an extension attribute with the token that we generated and also the timestamp of when that expires. Additionally, we're running that MDM action command. So this is a really cool one that before I started this process, I didn't know you could do. But other processes that have utilized this type of workflow that I've seen are kind of using a configuration profile, I think, per device. And sometimes that can be a little bit sticky. I don't want, for our 5,000 devices, a unique configuration profile every time we want to send like an API token or some sort of data down to the device. This is nice because it actually just sends an API command to the MDM commands endpoint in Jamf Pro with that settings command type. That settings command type then gives us a configuration. So we're sending a plist containing that API token that we generated in that previous step in Power Automate. And we're sending it to a specific identifier. This correlates with the file name that will appear in managed preferences later. And then we also have a management ID here. So this is of the device, and this is the device that we're deploying this down to. And back to our workflow, we're just finally doing a response back to the device and saying, status code 200, that succeeded. We're not giving it much more information from there at this point. We're just assuming that this is the device that is requesting for itself, but we don't want to give it any more information of whether or not it succeeded or failed. Power Automate is doing the rest of it in the back. So from there, Jamf Pro sent that MDM command to containing that requested token. And now the script that we're running is waiting and watching for that MDM command to complete. And that when it does complete, we'll see an updated file at library, manage preferences, and then the unique identifier that we specified before. So here, that's edu.nebraska.setupmanager.plist. That Power Automate token appears in that plist, and we can use that to request additional actions in our Power Automate flow. So before we did that init action or initiate, now we're going to do something different with the same URL. So here's what that plist file looks like. Pretty straightforward. It's just API key for the dictionary and then a string value. So now that step is completed and the device has retrieved a token for itself, it's going to prove to Power Automate that, hey, based off of the MDM action that just completed, I am the device that I said I was. So I can complete additional actions. So it's going to call that Power Automate workflow again. And this time, we have the same API URL, that management ID of the device, the config file that we're then pulling that API token value out of. And then we have another curl command that's running an action of update. We're going to set the site for the secondary action. Management ID and API token are needed to kind of validate this on the Power Automate side. And then we're actually just saying, here are the site and site name that we want to assign the device to. That was all supplied earlier in the process when we set the prefix and got the particular site name that was going to be assigned to. So here's that same JSON request body that's coming into Power Automate again, but this time we're using action, secondary action, management ID of the device. The token that was generated, we're supplying that back to Power Automate. The site name that we want to assign to, and the site ID. On the Power Automate side, we're receiving that HTTP request again. So this is another action in the flow being initiated. And we're also going to grab that information from Jamf again. So we're going to get an updated inventory record from Jamf to say, what is the latest and greatest? We want to grab particularly that extension attribute that contains what we supplied earlier, the token and the expiration. And then instead of the init action type, we're going down this route for our flow, where we're doing the update value. So we're parsing some of that JSON that came through, and then we're going to do a validation. So this is where we're actually checking to see, is this token that was supplied in the API flow, or the API call, equal to what is supplied in Jamf Pro. So we're kind of using Jamf Pro as like a database to see, is that token valid, and is the expiration supplied in the token, or in the extension attribute, also valid? Or has that expired? If that failed, we just return a sorry, 403 status code. But if it succeeds, then we can go on to the secondary action, which for this flow was set computer, or set site. So we're doing the set site value there, and this particular value is actually running an API command into Jamf Pro to set that site. It changes at this point. So this is all while we're still in that first setup item in our Jamf Setup Manager process. We've already switched to a separate site. We're also then just giving some information back to the computer to say, or the script that requested this, hey, everything looks good. we've successfully sent or changed the site on this particular device. So we were able to take that Jamf site, land it based off of that standard enrollment process into the general site that we land everything into, and then based off of the user that, or based off of the prefix that was selected, assigned it to a particular area of support. And then all of that happened in just a couple of seconds. It doesn't take too long. Really, the biggest weight in that process is the MDM command coming back down to the machine. So it's waiting for that MDM command to deliver. If you have issues with like MDM commands happening quickly in your environment, sometimes that could be a little bit of a process break in this flow. But we've been doing this most of this year, and it's worked pretty well. I don't see too many failures come through, and if they do, we're able to resolve those with other kind of workflows, like in self-service and stuff. So some of the security measures we were able to take through this process is that Jamf API credentials never touched the endpoint. We're never putting a username or password into a Jamf script parameter and doing those in plain text. And then only devices that can prove their MDM relationship with Jamf Pro are granted access into our Power Automate flow. Some future goals and like where I see this going, things I would like to add to this process is just really giving technicians different configuration experiences based off of who logs into the device. So if we're doing a single touch type workflow and we maybe want to do more of a white glove approach, maybe we give the technician different configuration options during Setup Assistant or during Jamf, during that Jamf Setup Assistant process. Additionally, maybe we can give the end user additional options. What I would really like to see, and something we're kind of moving towards as we are able to enrich our data more in our organization, is kind of removing the opportunity for failure there. So I don't want an end user to have to click any of those steps. We already know what department they're in, so if we can associate that information with an organizational prefix, we can do all of that for them. We can automatically assign their risk classification, and all of that happens in the background based off of just who logged into the device. That's not happening today, but that is a future desire for sure. And then I really want to try and improve the logging capabilities with this setup process. So when somebody does have an issue in this single pane of glass, in the single PreStage, we can more easily point to specific data in like Splunk or just within our Power Automate solution when something goes wrong. And then I think the really cool thing about this process is it doesn't require a zero-touch deployment model, but it definitely enables it for our organization. And we want to push that more as kind of a better model. We were doing really great when everybody was working from home, but we've slowly come back into the office, and people have gotten back into old ways. So we'll hopefully achieve some of those goals in the next year. So to review, we provided an opportunity here to allow for zero-touch deployments where technicians see fit. We offer that single-touch white glove approach in our workflow, and a little bit better support escalation when devices are using the same deployment process. But that's all I have here. I appreciate your time today. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, great job. Everyone give Quinn a round of applause, please. Thank you. Who's got questions? All right, let me come to you. All right.
Thank you. Sorry if I missed this, but since you're not storing any credentials on the endpoint, how are you validating with Power Automate that device should even be communicating in the first place while also being conscientious of Power Automate has costs to it? And so if somebody were to get a hold of that workflow and find your endpoint and just bombard it, what are you doing to secure that?
Yeah, I think that is a place where currently we are taking the management ID that is not necessarily it's a unique identifier that's in Jamf Pro, right? So we take that and we deliver it to the device, and then that URL is unique as well. We're regularly rotating that URL. That's not something that we just leave the same all the time. But it's an area of risk that we're willing to accept because we can see if a lot of requests are coming from the same place in Power Automate. It's something we can detect and change the URL or fix quickly. But that URL is added in the script parameter, and then the management ID comes down to the device through that Jamf setup configuration profile. So the only thing you're going to be able to do is bombard Power Automate with that initiate command, and we would see that happening. We'd see an influx, and we would be able to kind of divert that quickly. But good question.
Who else has a question? Yes.
There. Oh.
I guess to follow up on that, have you found an advantage of initiating the communication to Power Automate via that way versus writing to an extension attribute and then updating with an inventory update, which can trigger a smart group membership change and a webhook into Power Automate?
Sure. I guess, yeah, there are, I guess, a lot of different ways to do that. I don't know. I would have to think about that workflow, but I mean, yeah, I think that's the beauty of this, and I don't have any specific content to share of like this is the script we use. I would like to give that in the future, but that's the beauty of this process, is taking this idea and molding it the way that works best for you. So in this case, that is just kind of what works best for our process, and it has worked pretty efficiently so far. So. Also, I think adding another webhook is just like one more thing for Jamf to do in that process. So, we could weigh the resources there too. But
Awesome, Quinn, we got a question back.
Yeah. Do you assign any purchasing information during your setups? Like, so are you not concerned about like
assign what? Sorry.
Like a PO or anything like that? So you know like what department purchased it or.
We maintain a lot of that information externally, so it's not something that we necessarily store in Jamf Pro. We have like a device inventorying management solution that we're kind of associating that information with. So not something we store in Jamf.
Question? Yeah.
No question, just good stuff.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Love it. Compliments accepted as well, right? Questions? Going once? Going twice? So here's also what I noticed. People may have questions, but they may want to speak to you one-on-one. So with that, if there are no other questions, we'll give you one more awesome round of applause because you did such a great job.
Thank you. And one final thing, if you want to learn more about this process, or you just want to like connect and talk more about your ideas, or maybe something you've done in your area, come find me, come talk to me, or just shoot me an email. I'm always happy to chat with other folks from other institutions. So appreciate you coming out today.
Quinn, great job. If people want to connect with you, can they meet with you out in the hallway?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining this session. Great job, Quinn.